Well, on that subject, the testimony from the Senate side was that Russia is involved in an ongoing campaign to meddle in our democracy, to undermine our democracy through social media and other means. And that in answer to questions, it was acknowledged in answer to a question of FBI Director Wray that the president has never sought a solution, a program for defense. To my knowledge, there has never been a principals meeting or a deputies committee meeting. Do you think that there will be an adequate defense, no matter what Homeland has done or is doing, if the White House does not acknowledge that this is urgent?
No, I don't think there can be. The Russians are a very sophisticated cyber actor. If they want to get into the DNC in 2020, they'll get in. If they want to get into the RNC, they'll get in there. There's no cyber fix for this. There's no patch that we can implement to protect all our institutions. We've seen how even some of the best protected institutions have been penetrated by the Russians, Chinese, and others. So there's no, perfect cyber cure here. Ultimately, we need a whole-of-government response to this, which we're not going to get as long as the commander-in-chief doesn't insist on it. And he's not going to insist on it because he views this as a threat to his legitimacy. Any acknowledgement of what the Russians did is a threat to his legitimacy. More than that, though, what we really need is a bipartisan, indeed nonpartisan consensus that if any foreign power meddles again, we will reject it, no matter who it helps and who it hurts. We didn't have that in 2016. We had a candidate who was willing to egg on and encourage the Russians to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, and they'd be richly rewarded, and trumpeted every daily dump of these emails. That cannot happen again. Somehow we have to get past this, and I'm often struck in my work with the terrible, seems like mostly terrible, fortuity of world events. And one of the most terrible from my point of view is that at the very time where the Russians decided to be the least risk-averse, to jump into our elections with both feet in a very ham-handed way, it happened to be at the same time where one of the presidential candidates was willing to embrace that and not reject it. Because I'm certain that had John McCain or Mitt Romney been the nominee in 2016, they would have said, Russia, butt the hell out. We don't need your help. We don't want your help. We despise your involvement. We're not going to make use of your ill-gotten gains. That's not who we are. But that's not who Donald Trump was. And I think that more than anything else, to protect ourselves in the future, we need to develop that consensus that any foreign interference will be rejected. It could cut in completely the opposite direction. The Russians are equal opportunity malevolent actors. They're not Republicans and they're not Democrats. They're just designed in their foreign policy and their cyber policy to undermine the United States. They view the world as a zero-sum game where anything that's good for us is bad for them and vice versa. I do think, though, that in fairness, some of the responsibility is also attributed to the Obama administration for not establishing a more forceful deterrent. I think it goes back to the Korean hack of Sony, in which there was a minimal response. I think that others around the world watched that and determined that cyber is a cost-free intervention. There will always be a certain level of plausible deniability with cyber because even though we're quite good at attribution now, we're never going to want to fully show our hands about how we know who did what. But you don't need to show your hand as long as you can establish a deterrent. And you don't need to necessarily respond to a cyber attack with another cyber response. I think the response in North Korea should have been an informational response. The North Koreans hate it when South Korea responds with information about how terrible their regime is. That, I think, if we had embarked on an informational response, would have been a deterrent to further North Korean meddling. And with the Russians, we should have called them out much earlier. Senator Feinstein and I were the first two to make an official attribution, but it's not the same coming from two members of Congress from the same party as it is from an administration. And while I respect the motive in terms of the Obama administration, they didn't want to be seen as meddling. The American people had a right to know what was going on and could be trusted to do the right thing with it, and they should have defended being more public and aggressive at the time, at least in my view.